Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Dr. Keith Gomez, Pastor Emeritus of Northwest Bible Baptist Church and the founder of Providence Baptist College. Preacher, welcome back.
Good to be back.
Thanks so much for being with us. And you just retired a year ago from the pastorate of the church. And this is your first time back in the ministries of Northwest, preached for us this past Sunday and teaching at the college a couple days of modules. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the transition that took place. Obviously, it was a day, but it was a day that was planned for long before. And I've never been a part of a transition from one pastor to another. And other people, I suppose, who have said it was the smoothest transition they've ever seen in a church. I'll have to take their word for it. But you've been around for quite a while. Maybe you've seen some church transitions, helped churches with that. What did we do? Where did we get the ideas? How far back were we planning for something that took place just a year ago?
First of all, it's a joy to be back. As I said Sunday, it's like I'm going back for a one-night date with an old girlfriend, right? But this is Cajun Day. We got Cajun Day today and then Camo Day tomorrow, so I want everybody to understand, if they're watching this, that I'm normally dressed up. But I'd rather dress down than up. But
I agree.
Go hunting, but anyway. But it's amazing. Yeah. I've watched down through the years transitioning. That's a bad word today, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to explain yourself. Huh?
People are wanting me to write a book on how to transition. I said, boy, that'll get a lot of attention. But I've watched it down through the years, and I saw a lot of failures in the sense of when the guy that's been there for the long time, when he moves out and somebody comes in, the church many times goes down and crash and burn. Shouldn't be that way ever.
Yes, sir.
Ever. There's other, I guess, denominations or whatever. Sometimes when they make a transition, the church goes up. Well, that's what should happen if, as guys age. And my position has always been not to overstay your welcome. So a lot of guys, they're married to a paycheck, and so they gotta stay. And when they had it real going on, when they had a lot of energy and things were going well, the church was here. They began to get older, and they don't have the energy, and problems and heartache and problem people sometimes wears them down. And then it's that way in every profession in the world, pretty much. Now, the thing about it, with age comes tremendous wisdom, which most young men do not have and will never have until they get older. That's why you got to tap into the wisdom. I always did that. I remember Brother House told me, he said, Keith, I noticed that all of your speakers that you're having are all the old men. And that's tremendously wise. I knew well enough to know that I could sit with them and tap into their wisdom, and I did that. I never had my peers come in. I always had these older men. So when I watched that happen, I thought that, there's going to come one day in the future when I'm going to have to transition out. And I got to thinking about how that needs to be done. I've never seen it done the way we did it. I have heard, because of Dr. Buchanan, different ones tell me that when they made the transition, in other words, he would preach a Wednesday, the head pastor would preach a Sunday morning, he'd preach a Sunday night, the head pastor would preach a Wednesday night, and it'd rotate out. Okay. I got to think that's okay, but it's not, to me, it's not turning the hearts of the people toward the next guy. So I got to thinking that for all these 40 years, I've pastored and traveled virtually every week, preaching somewhere. So I thought that, man, it'd be good. And a lot of times I'd like to stay over Wednesday in revival and stuff, if I'm preaching, Monday through Wednesday revival. But I had to come home for Wednesday night.
Got it, yeah.
And no matter where I'm at, I've got to get back. And boy, sometimes it's a tough thing, and I won't go into all that. But then I got thinking, well, if I could give Brother Cavanaugh a Wednesday nights, and I told him, I said, if you can take what I have here and let the people know that you can teach and preach the Bible, I said, they'll start turning their eyes from me to you. Most preachers will not allow to do that because they're very, very jealous. Mm-hmm. And I'm not quite understanding the jealousy part, especially of young men, but especially old men too, that they're jealous about the people's heart being transferred. Mm-hmm. I've always shared my people with my staff. Whoever my people want to be a blessing and help to has been fine with me. I appreciate my people loving my staff too. A lot of preachers get jealous of that. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway. So I figured that if I gave him Wednesday nights, and he could solidify himself as a teacher and preacher, and their eyes would turn toward him. Then I was gone a few Sundays, and so he understood what it was to take a Sunday over and all. Everybody thinks they got it all figured out, but they really don't. And then as you get to where we're at, sometimes you find out you really didn't have it figured out anyway. But you had it more figured out than some of the young men. But I'm saying that I knew that was the right thing to do. And because of that, we were able to step aside, and it seemed like nobody missed stride.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
You mentioned something that I think was profound. You talked about how older preachers, they'll just hang around because they're married to a paycheck. Ultimately, the ability to transition this way was not necessarily a ministry-driven decision as much as it was as a personal, financial-driven decision where you had the ability to step away from the pastorate and, easily transition another guy in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've been going around the country, of course, now for many, many years now, trying to teach younger men like yourself that's pastoring. Man, you better start doing something.
Yeah.
And if you need me to come in and talk to your men, I'll gladly do that and have. I've done that in quite a few ministries that were actually pretty good-sized ministries, younger men. Done one in Iowa that you'd know of, and they were not doing enough for the preacher in his housing, not doing enough anything for him in retirement.
Okay.
So somehow these young men need to set up some retirement situation where they're not married to a paycheck, and everybody has that out there, and some preachers don't. And when the time comes when they need to step aside, they can't. Mm-hmm. And most preachers don't want to be a greeter at Walmart. And there's nothing wrong with that, but most preachers don't want to do that.
Yes, sir.
So somewhere they got to get that thing right, and so God allowed me to do that. And then the church finally, for all of those many years, I didn't take a raise. And I refused them for years, cheating my family. I shouldn't have done that. I was young, again, inexperienced and ignorant, but I shouldn't have ever done that. But I did for many, many years. Then they did something for the wife. Because I wouldn't get the. And then one time we had a man just mutinied my meeting, my men's meeting, just turned his back. He said, he ain't going to take no raises. I'm going to make a motion that we give him a couple $100 a week raise. I just wept. I mean, I remember I called the wife, said we can start dressing the kids better. So a lot of this was my fault because of not taking him. But then I got to the point where I never discussed my raises, and you can get all the tapes and look at it and listen to it. I don't want to talk about money and me. So then somebody suggested just do a cost of living raise every year, and that's what we did. We never discussed salary, anything, or raises. So that's what we did, and the Lord allowed that sum to come up quite a bit. But then the church also, one of my men said we need to do something for the preacher concerning his retirement, and that's what they did. So it worked out well, and I was able to do that, able to step aside. So
thanks. We've talked about the process of the transition. Do you mind if we talk about the man in the transition? Obviously, you picking or recommending the next pastor to Northwest Bible Baptist Church was something that probably weighed heavy on your mind for a while. I mean, you probably saw a 10-year plan. I need someone to be, with me on this 10-year plan. You just didn't want to call somebody from the outside. What criteria were you looking for, and how long were you looking, and how long would you recommend a transition take place where a co-pastor and pastor situation happens?
Just had a preacher. I'm actually dealing with like 3 or 4 preachers now in transition. trying to, and they're
Yeah.
asking me what to do. One guy didn't have any retirement, and he
Yes,
told me, he said, I have no retirement. So I told him what to do, and I actually preached in a church and preached to his men, and his men came to me and said, Preacher, everything you said we needed, and we're going to meet with the pastor, and they did. And I think they gave him a couple $100,000, but he had nothing. They had not done anything for him because he didn't set that up. As far as choosing someone, I'm dealing with several preachers on that too. Who and what and how. You gotta find somebody that understands servitude. You never be a great leader unless you're a servant. That's what I was with Dr. Buchanan, so I've always honored my preachers. Dr. Smith, I just finished preaching with him. Dr. Smith and Dr. Buchanan and Dr. Hiles. I always bragged on them. From the pulpit, everywhere I've gone to this day, everywhere I preach, people will know who they are because I bragged on them, because I know who got me here, and most people don't understand that. And when something is given to you as great as salvation and then training and teaching, you need to make sure that everybody remembers those individuals. And you better remember where you came from.
Yes, sir.
So I've always done that. So when you're looking for somebody to take the helm, you got to look for a servant. So I had a lot of people I could choose from here on staff. The problem I have sometimes is that the preacher will turn it over to a pulpit committee. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that's the way it's been done. And when they give it to the pulpit committee, they will then do a pastoral search. So they'll send out different feelers. Then you got somebody that will, send their resume in or whatever that is. And so then it becomes a preaching contest. I don't want to be unkind, but what does layman know about who the church needs if it turns into a preaching contest? So it's the one who can preach the best and shout it out or whatever. Man, he can really preach. Well, yeah, but is his family right? And is his finances right? Is his morals right? Does he meet the criteria? We do the pastoral qualifications. Normally,
Sure.
Have you been married before? But how about hospitality? That's one of the
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of things that involve qualification of pastor. But the one thing I looked for, and I had, was that servitude. So won't go into the details, and it's nobody's business. But Brother Cavanaugh, I asked, told him to come back here, and we were going to try to get him in a ministry somewhere, pastorate somewhere. When he got here, he just started serving, doing things, and then he was. It's not that he did things for me, but he did that, and when he saw things, and I go, man, it'd be sad to let this guy just go. Let me put him on staff, and did. Then when I did that, I even saw more. And I want to say this the right way, but what I saw in him is what I was for Dr. Buchanan. He was doing for me what I was doing for Dr. Buchanan. He would watch every little thing and see every little need that I would have and serve the pastor. So I just figured that this would be somebody that I'd be interested in. So I approached him and asked him, did he think that he could handle something like this? Now, it's very dangerous because most churches this size would always get somebody that's extremely experienced and already built a church and had pastored a long time.
Proven, yeah.
I had a man call me yesterday. He said, man, I got two men. I can get a 60-year-old guy, gray-haired 60-year-old, a young man. And he said, this young man had been assistant pastor. He'd never done anything, never built anything. He said, what should I do? And I said, well, that's what I did. Yeah. But I've watched and mentored a bit with Cavanaugh to the point where I understood that could happen. Now, greatness is not, and leadership is not in preaching ability. It's in actually leadership, and there's a difference. I've heard some guys couldn't preach their way out of a wet paper bag, but great leaders, and they built big churches because they're great leaders and knew how to organize and know how to do those things. So if you can get both, you got a good deal going, right?
Yes, sir.
But but greatness is not in years; it's in decades. So I'm going to be just straight up, man. Yeah. There's still proof in the pudding, and there's going to have to, Brother Cavanaugh and Northwest going to have to prove itself over the next 10 and 20 years. It's not just right now.
Yeah.
I think I made the right choice, and I think things were going well, or I wouldn't have done this. But to think that we could get somebody out there that we did not know to come in when we had somebody in here that we did know, to me was wisdom. And it's obvious as the church is moving now, and and moving on. That's what I wanted to do. I prayed all the time, Kim and I, that the church would continue to go. I didn't get 40 years of my life in here for this thing to be destroyed.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But sometimes young men take it another way. I've heard so many horror stories where young men will take a ministry and change it to the point and then run the old man off. It is sad and sick, and that young man will reap that. But I'm discussing that with several preachers across the nation. It's really sad. I didn't want that. So by having someone intact like that and knowing and watching the character of the individual had everything to do with my choice.
One last question. In this transition time, your interaction with Pastor Cavanaugh, are there certain kinds of conversations that you would recommend the pastor to have with the, young man who may be transitioning into that position? I don't know if it's a heart-to-heart of some kind of, periodically, hey, I want to make sure, give you my philosophy on finances, give you my philosophy on this. Here's what we do at Northwest, and what topics do you need to cover?
We did that. I mean, we discussed, and he was around long enough to know how the thing operated. Sure. But we talked about that, and I told him, I said, you're not me, so you're going to do things different. But what saddens me a lot of times, even about you, David, or anybody, him, they were not here in the early years. When we went night and day, 24/7, and you doubt that, sit down with Brother Ballard and ask him, because he was on staff here.
Yes, sir.
Brother Ramus, we went 24/7. We hit it like crazy, man. Knocking doors, winning souls, getting them down, getting them baptized. There was a price that was paid to get it where it's at right now. Everybody needs to remember that. And then a lot of those people are dead, and we already buried them, but there's still folks in our church that paid the price to get us to this point. You can't shun them. So I talked about that, but I talked about you're going to be doing things a little different. And there's some things you should not ever change. And one I warned him about would be the finances. So we talked about philosophy, we talked about how things were done, and what I'm thrilled about is, I ran out of time. I didn't run out of vision. In fact, a lot of guys begged me never to, please don't do this, please don't do. I got to do what God tells me to do, not what men tells me to do. But there are a lot of guys that were more successful after their retirement years, 70 and 80 years old.
Yeah.
And you can read this if you want to do some reading on it, that was tremendously successful. They have the wisdom now and wherewithal, right? But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get out when I could. But I'm saying that I had vision. I ran out of time. I didn't run out of vision.
Yes, sir.
So, and I shared some of the futuristic things that I would do. I think it's thrills me to know that Brother Cavanaugh he listened to that. He didn't have to do those. That was mine.
Sure.
But he's listening to, and what he was thinking, that's not a bad vision. Absolutely. So he's kind of doing some of that, which I'm thrilled about. Now things may change, and he may not do them all, or he may do more, which is fine. Yeah. It's wonderful. But I think that thrills me that he will then carry on some of what I would have loved that got done if I had time. Ran out of time, not out of vision.
Well, thank you so much, Preacher, for joining us. And if you want to check out our other episodes on our YouTube channel, make sure that you do that. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you share it with somebody that will enjoy it. And we want to grow this YouTube channel and also the audio-only platforms as well. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you.